Let's do some lightning
Yeah,
rounds and
go
we'll
for
get
it.
to the end of this. All right. What do you think is the most underrated leadership skill in the physician executive universe that we're talking about?
Yeah, I think empathy. I think empathy.
Great. All right. Next one. Biggest misconception about physician executives. Yeah.
That we've forgotten what it's like to be a physician.
One word that comes to mind that describes the future of physician leadership.
Looking out my window right now, it's bright. I think it's bright. I really do.
Beautiful. All right. True, false. Most physicians are mentally prepared for leadership. True or false?
Oh,
You might get what you're after. Cool babies. Strange but not a stranger. I'm an ordinary guy. Burning down the house.
Hello, and welcome to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. I'm your host, Lee Scheinbart, and this podcast brings you the hottest and most crucial conversations in healthcare and physician leadership. Today, we are going further into the hidden world of physician executives with our special guest, Dr. Leo Spector, CEO of OrthoCarolina, one of the nation's leading independent orthopedic practices with over 160 physicians across 40 plus locations in North and South Carolina. Dr. Spector earned his BA in history from Colgate University and later earned his MD from UMass Chan Medical School, where he stayed on to complete his orthopedic residency. Dr. Spector was selected to participate in the American Orthopedic Association Leadership Program conducted in collaboration with the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And in 2020, he earned an executive MBA from Duke University's Business School. As a board certified fellowship trained orthopedic spine surgeon and one who is still practicing to this day, Dr. Spector has enjoyed a 17-year tenure with OrthoCarolina, the physician-led, community-driven, and evidence-based patient-centered care organization in his region. Leo, welcome to the show.
wow, Lee, that was one heck of an introduction. I'm gonna have you call my mother. That was awesome.
My son, the doctor. Yeah, I get that.
Oh God, yeah. Sounds like I've accomplished something with my life.
Well, give credit to your team that helped me prepare that, but it speaks volumes to what we're going to get into today, and
Yes,
that is
yeah,
about this.
it really does. It really,
Yeah.
really, it really does.
Um, you may remember I contacted you to be on the show because I read a piece in Becker's that was entitled Physician's Journey Back to the C-Suite, in which you were quoted as saying, I think more physicians need to be involved in physician leadership, whether it's running their own practice or even if they're in an employed model. And you also said, I think we should see more physicians that are involved with hospital administration or healthcare insurance companies because at the end of the day, we're the ones caring for the patients. We need to have a strong voice in leadership. And yet, in the article, you freely admitted the challenges that physicians face when pivoting towards this type of role, and not to mention your very own struggles. So, the last quote I'll share before we get into it is you're quoted as saying that the dean, I assume at Duke, suggested that you're not there to earn your MBA to become a CFO either. You're there to learn how to translate these two worlds and be a leader. Is that about right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I love all those quotes. I'm glad I'm the one that said them. Uh, the that moment in business school, and it wasn't directed solely at me, but it really struck home for myself because we were taking first semester of business school. So obviously, as a surgeon, Type A personality, and lots of Type A personalities in the room, but as a surgeon, probably at the higher end of that Type A personality. And we're taking financial accounting, and I'm just triggered to go back to like days of organic chemistry and pre-med, and like you've got to get the highest grade in the class and you've got to be the best, and to do that you get into medical school, and that gets you the residency, and then that get so. And we were struggling as a class collectively, myself included, because we were focused way too much on the minutia and not understanding the larger picture. And so the dean that oversaw accounting had to come into our class. And I will never forget him saying that, saying, you are not here to become the CFO of a company. You're here to be the CEO. And as such, you need to know how to talk to your CFO. You need to understand them on a certain level so that you can convey the larger organizational goals as the CEO, the strategy and the execution. But you've got to be able to work with those people. So you got to understand their language, but you're not there to do their job. And that was really like an aha moment where I stood back and said, oh, took a deep breath and said, okay, I don't need to learn this to become a CFO. I just need to learn this to understand the bigger picture. Because as a surgeon, you do need to know the job to be a surgeon, right? And every part of that minutia, because you are the subject matter expert. But that's not the role as an administrator, especially not as a CEO. You are the subject matter expert on none of these folks in your C suite. They're the subject matter experts. You've got to work with them. That's very different than being a surgeon. It would be like walking to the operating room with a multiple surgeons all having to do or multiple roles, the anesthesiologist, the surgeon, the scrub tech, and you walk in the room and you just orchestrate that team, right? As surgeons, we're not used to that, or anesthesiologists. We're used to being the person who's doing the surgery, providing the anesthesia, being the scrub tech. Our role as CEOs and administrators is to step back and make sure that that team is functioning at a high level so they each can do their job. So yeah, that quote was very helpful. I'm glad it happened early because I was able to sit back and actually enjoy the MBA a little bit and not treat it like medical school. And it was great. I would recommend going to get an MBA to anybody. It was amazing learning. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah, I appreciate some of the filling in of the blanks because I could only read the article, and now you're bringing the story to life, and you articulate, at least how I'm hearing it, that the dean helped you begin to shift your mindset, and the analogy of walking into the OR, what our colleagues have over us that while we've been busy practicing, and they've been in these board meetings and these boardrooms, is that they know that none of them are the subject matter expert on the issue at hand, but they are experts in having a conversation and saving a life one meeting at a time. They know how to work together as a team, which is a skill of leadership. You have a team in the OR. The anesthesiologist has a team. The pre-op holding and PACU has a team. But putting all those teams into one giant organic team is really that mindset approach, and that takes a certain amount of experience that we don't exactly get. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, tremendously. Yeah, no, we don't have that at all. I mean, what I tell folks that ask me about it is the skill you need to be a good leader and administrator, as you articulated, is to be able to be in that meeting not as a subject matter expert but have the subject matter experts around you and ask the good questions. Be curious, get that out there, be able to distill it, sum it up, and come up with a conclusion. And what I tell folks is, imagine if I walked into my OR one day and I said to everybody in the room, "What should we do today? How should we do surgery?" Right? I mean, I joke, but I think the nurse, my circulator nurse I've known forever would probably run to the administrator and be like, "We need to get somebody down here. Dr. Spector's lost his marbles." The surgeon we walk in and say, "This is the patient. This is the problem. This is the plan. We are going to execute." Right? And it is very much command and control. We don't sit there and ask them, "How would you like to do this? How should we do this?" Now we have developed a questioning attitude in the OR, which is a good one, which teaches in that command and control environment for the folks that are not at the top of that pyramid as a surgeon, when they see things that are concerning, for them to ask good questions, right? And that's a healthy environment. But the surgeon's not taught to ask questions. The surgeon is taught to come in and be the domain expert, and that is the exact opposite. And it's a hard transition because it's years of training, right? It's the 10,000-hour rule. We are highly trained to do that over and over and over again. And then to walk into a boardroom and realize you're not the subject matter expert, you're not there to solve all the problems. You're really there to learn from other folks and distill it. It's hard. Listen, I've only been on the job for a year and 3 quarters. I mean, it's still a struggle for me every day. And every day I think, how can I do it better? And I walk out of meetings like, "Ah, man, I didn't get that right today. I was too surgeon solution orientated and not enough, what you want to call it, a coach or an orchestra, bringing people together orientated." So it's tough.
That's another elegant analogy and personal story. The physician, and this is true in the cognitive disciplines where you're not orchestrating an OR or necessarily a procedure, but you are there to execute a task. I need a differential diagnosis in my brain. I need certain tests accomplished. I need to assemble this and create a result, whether it's in the mind or with the hands and the care of the patient. And so when you're in a meeting room with other executives, it isn't even clear sometimes that you are coming up with a result, but you are coming up with a plan to then have other people execute to those results that you're looking for: quality, safety, experience, engagement. Absolutely agree with what you just said. And we won't pick on you too hard for only being in the role a little while, but obviously you've learned quite a bit in a very reasonable period of time. And one of the things you mentioned in the article is, these differences, as you're pointing out, between the clinical mind and clinical leadership and this organizational leadership. And some may have been harder to internalize than others, these differences. Can you point out a difference or two that you can relate to us?
Yeah, I think one of them was learning how you measure success. As a surgeon, a lot of it is focused around very quantitative things, right? How many patients did I see today? How many surgeries did I perform? What was my patient satisfaction score? What was my patient reported outcome? They are very tangible, they are very quantitative, and as a surgeon, they're very immediate, right? I'm not even a primary care doctor. Like the primary care doctors, I think, have a little bit of advantage over a surgeon because they're used to taking care of things over a long period of time and having to influence the behavior of a human being to make those changes and be successful. As a surgeon, a lot of it resides within us. And so going from quantitative to qualitative, right? It's not about the number of meetings you have, it's not about the number of projects you have, right? It really is about how did that meeting go, right? And you may not know the answer to that for days, months, potentially years. And we are not trained for that as surgeons, where our minds are not geared for it. Our dopamine receptors, like, what gets us going is it doesn't hit it. And so having to learn to remeasure what is success, what is self-worth, it's a lot because you've been trained a certain way. So that's a big change.
Yeah, yeah, no, very insightful. Again, just like trying to get that great grade in organic chemistry, you accomplish and measure very quickly to yourself the number of patients, the number of procedures, and the score on a test. And you're right; it's not as immediately measurable in a quantitative way, and it is more qualitative. And to your further point, and when I teach the physician executives that I work with, we are generically, physicians self-select to go into school. Sometimes the parents beat on real hard, you will become a doctor. But, hopefully the parent recognizes they have the right capability and capacity to do it. And so that we're wired exactly the way you describe. And if not, it gets hammered into us for good measure, and hopefully in a better way than back in the day. But then we have to learn how to reevaluate and remeasure the things that we're facing. So I absolutely agree with you. Perhaps, and you mentioned something in the article that triggered something for me. Since we are trained in that command and control, what was there an episode or a moment where you had that surgeon physician default mindset and it really tripped you up? Maybe it was the first day, the first week, maybe it was last week, and you learned how to adjust. Any anecdotes on that?
Yeah, no, it, it it's something that tripped me up even before I took the role. Something I was thinking of, and it continues to trip me up to this today. And I'm thinking, at the end of our time together, I'd have to go into a meeting at noon to lead our project list, and already thinking ahead of time about how that command and control is not going to work in that room. That's not my job in that room. But actually, in business school, they ask us to write in our leadership class about this type of thing on a personal level. And what I really talked about was how do I go from the physician mindset, because I'm in the OR once a week, I'm in clinic once a week, I'm acting like a physician, that's all my training, and then having to shift gears and walk into the boardroom. And so I wrote the paper really talking about how in surgery we have a checklist. We do a checklist before surgery. We talk about, we identify the patient, the diagnosis, the allergies. What are we going to do? Do we have all the right equipment? And so I really formulated the idea of having a checklist before you walk into the boardroom to kind of check yourself. What is the meeting about? Who's going to be in the room? What are the goals? What are we hoping to accomplish to really kind of reset the mind frame of maybe all we're going to do is just understand each other's point of view and just talk about and learn the issue more. There won't be a resolution. There won't be a solution. There won't be surgery performed. There won't even be a diagnosis, right? We're just going to gather the information. But as a surgeon, you walk into the room and you just think, as a surgeon, we just go right to the solution. We skip the problem. We just go right to the solution, right? We don't even take a history and physical. We're already cutting, we're cutting them open, right? And so having that kind of moment to kind of check yourself before you walk into that room, because it to this day, it continues to trip me up.
Yeah.
Um, I always tell my fellows that there's a difference between going fast, being a fast surgeon, and being an efficient surgeon. I tell them you don't want to be a fast surgeon because if you go too fast, you're going to make mistakes and ultimately it'll cost you more time, let alone the human cost. You want to be an efficient surgeon. And efficient means sometimes you move fast and sometimes you move slow. So that in the total sum of things. And so what I would notice is that meetings when I would come in and I would immediately know what the problem. I would immediately know the solution before I even heard the problem, and I would cut people off and say, "Okay, this is what we're going to do." And I'm like, "Man, I just saved everybody some time. This is great, and I'm proud of myself. I solved the problem. That's what I do. I'm a surgeon. We solve problems." And then only to find out that the meeting after the meeting just began, and then I've got to have another meeting that's going to take twice as long to undo all the damage that I caused by not taking a moment, hearing, listening, digesting. I fight that urge every day because
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah. I mean,
what I know.
that that cadence and culture is so critically important. And again, we're taught to execute a task and there's a timeline. And to your point, where if your skills and your judgment is you can move fast or slow depend. But when you walk into a meeting, there's a culture, especially before on the first day that you have this new title. And you better be respectful of that culture, which is we're going to talk and we're going to put everything out on the table. And if you come in with, Dr. Spector has the answer. People will, and this is not just you. I talk to people all over. You talk to people all over. This is just one of the things we struggle with of developing that pacing, that cadence, and respect the culture by which you will gain credibility and earn their trust, which will go much, much farther down the road than just walking in and snapping out the answer, right?
Oh, for sure. And one of the things, that I use in those meetings, and it took a little while culturally, within my executive leadership team, my C-suite, I made it a point early on to say, no one is to call me Dr. Spector. I'm Leo. You're Brent, you're Bob, you're Blair, you're Amy, you're Neil, you're Trey. We leave the monikers, and some people would keep calling me Dr. Spector, and I refer to them as like, my attorney, I'd say Esquire, whatever her last name was, right? It's like we're first name basis, but you gotta check that. I think the other thing about that I find, an ongoing challenge, which is what I enjoy, is that while we can talk about this and acknowledge it, um, don't always do it, right?
Yeah.
And I will fall back in old patterns and old habits. And sometimes I beat myself up over that. I get tougher on myself because, again, as a surgeon, you tend to be a perfectionist. But I think you step back and you realize that, none of us are perfect, right? This is a journey we're all on trying to get better every day. The key thing, I think, is the ability to acknowledge it, right? To at least have the awareness to say, this is how we should behave, this is how we should act. That's the first step. And I think for a lot of surgeons, it's tough as they take administrative roles to even make that first step. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
they're taught to be the experts. And for them to walk in the room and admit they're not the expert is the antithesis to everything we've been taught. And so that is a really challenging first step is to understand it's okay to not be the expert. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to show you don't understand something. It's actually really good. It shows your curiosity, humility. And I try to think back to when you were in medical school. You didn't know anything. You were excited to learn. You're asking great questions, right? So try to bring yourself back to that and ask those great questions so you can learn again and realize it's okay. You don't have to be the smartest one in the room.
Yeah, yeah, and you were quoted in the article almost verbatim of what you just said. You have to start getting comfortable knowing what you don't know and asking good questions. And I love that strategy of going back to medical school. Another strategy is very similar is walking in with a beginner's mind. Talk to me like I'm from the auto mechanic shop down the street. I understand auto mechanics, but I don't understand this issue. And are there any other strategies or practices beyond like a beginner's mindset to create the awareness that you don't need to, nor should you know all the answers? Anything else come to mind?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is just having humility. I think, and again, the medical field, not just surgeons, right? It's one. You think about it to cut a human body open, right, or to prescribe a treatment. You got to have a pretty big ego to do that.
Mhm.
And I think in that place, ego can be helpful. Otherwise, we'd be paralyzed and not be able to do what we do as physicians. But I think in this place, ego starts to become a problem. And so I think learning how to take your ego into check, and there's lots of different ways people do it, right? People do it through meditative practice. Some people do it through, this or that or exercise or whatever it may be. But I think understanding that sometimes ego is the enemy, right? To quote a famous book there. Um, and learning when it's good to have an ego and when it's not.
Yeah, yeah, getting our egos out of our own way, and this is beyond just being a physician. That's a real hard task. Our ego just gets right out in front of us before we have a chance to think it through. It's almost spontaneous and automatic. Good stuff. Well, along with that, and maybe in the same way, you described the perfectionism that is common amongst physicians and the beating up of oneself. And how do we get past internalizing these feelings and the sense of embarrassment or discomfort and especially when we're shown. I mean, at least it happened in my career. You don't show vulnerability. We're taught almost in training. It's a sign of weakness. Remember, everybody says strong work, Leo, strong work.
Yeah.
How do you get over that? How do you work through that?
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely, you and I think Lee are probably similar generations that went through medical training. And I would say that training back then, definitely was not akin to getting past that, right? I think the training today, as I'm observing it in the residents that I work with and the fellows, I think that training is changing. There is an acknowledgement and recognition that the way we were trained before perhaps was not the best way, and the generation before that was even worse. So I am hopeful that is going to change, but the bulk of physicians that are in their mid career or kind of just getting past that, those that would be in leadership roles because they've come that far, probably are the folks that like you and I were trained that way. And so, for me, I think it's that understanding that it's okay to be transparent. It's okay to show some humility. If you think about when you're with your patients and you try to build that with their patients, they want confidence from their surgeon. But I think a lot of them appreciate it when you show the humility to say, we don't have all the answers. We don't know. We think that based upon everything, this is likely the best treatment course. And you start making shared decision making. They appreciate that because they feel like, okay, this person's being honest with me. And I think the same applies when you start working with your team in an administrative role, right? If you come in showing some vulnerability, some humility, some transparency, it breaks down the walls that naturally exist because there's a natural hierarchy and structure, right? Whether you're the surgeon or you're the CEO, there's a hierarchy. But showing that allows to break down some of those walls and start to build some of the trust. And the only way you're going to have a successful team in the OR or out of the OR is you have to have trust. People have to trust each other. They've got to feel like they can have those candid and can those conversations, right? So you think back to now the OR, the questioning attitude concept. Well, that's not going to occur if the team is so fearful still that the surgeon is going to yell at them. But if you build that trust and you show that willingness to listen, then they will speak up and they'll save you, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
they'll see something you might have missed and they'll be willing to speak up and say, "Hey, Dr. Spector," and you'll be like, "Oh my God, thank you." It's the same thing I think goes with the team. So if you're not willing to show that, and so I think start learning that that's actually a strength and not a weakness because you and I were taught that that's a weakness. Can't show it. You got to be strong, strong work. And I stayed up 36 straight hours and took care of patients. And we know now that that's not good, right? And so learning is okay. It's not only is it okay to ask for help, it's really good to ask for help.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
I,
it takes some retraining.
I'm working with a group and the enterprise chief medical officer. It's a big hospital system. He taught me something that was very helpful is he looks for people when he hires them that they're willing to describe their mistakes. And they have a culture of, we want you to share your mistakes and we will be open with you and work through them. And back to the earlier part of, or perhaps thematic here, we aren't trained to admit those mistakes. And we're actually really fearful to tell if we're an intern, to tell the PGY2, to tell the chief, the program director, for fear that that will ruin us. And in fact, and it's not true. And so, as you and I agree with you, in our education, we're getting better at this. We're shifting, but certainly in a corporate construct, big or small, you do have to be vulnerable. You have to admit what you don't know. You have to be able to admit mistakes, and it will tell you everything you need to know about your boss, how your boss handles your admission, right?
Yep. I mean, I think there's so much there, Lee. One thing I think about is myself. I was a history major in college. I wasn't your typical pre med, and I loved history because again, what you can learn from it, right? And so when you talk about mistakes, to me, a mistake it's in the past. That's history. But why do we study history? To learn from it so we don't repeat ourselves, right? And so if we're not going to talk openly about our mistakes, we're not going to learn from them. And now we've not only harmed that one patient where we made a mistake, we've harmed the hundreds of others because we didn't learn from that mistake or we didn't teach others our mistake, right? And so my late grandfather, my father's father was a surgeon as well. And I'll misquote it, but he used to carry around a little card in his wallet that my father shared with me, basically saying as surgeons, we are forever indebted to our patients for allowing us to experiment on them and learn, right? And shame on us if we don't do that, right? If we just experiment, that's shameful. If we learn, right, because we're learning from the mistakes and then we teach others, then we're moving things forward, right? We're progressing. And so the same thing applies when you're working with your team, right? Is you have to have the openness to say, mistake. I've made so many mistakes over the past, 18 months. I think where I am been strong is a willingness to say, I made a mistake. Let's talk about it. Let's learn about it. Openness to try to then fix it and move forward. And most importantly, what I try to tell the team is I'm not upset that we made a mistake. I'll only be upset if we didn't learn from it and repeat the mistake. Let's make new mistakes, right? Because we're going to make new mistakes. I'm going to make new mistakes. But let's stop repeating the same mistakes because then, shame on us. Then we're not a learning or growing organization.
Yeah, yeah. Your organization is very lucky to have someone like you. I believe that creates strength in organizations, and it gets rid of the dysfunctions, and you have a much stronger group around you and your teams and everywhere, which supports the value that your organization brings to your community. So one last question, if we have time, we'll do some lightning rounds here. And I realize that this, you've not been in this particular role, but you've been in leadership for a long time. You think there's some kind of mental tipping point where you sort of begin to shift and you are thinking, and now you're going home or it's a Saturday or Sunday and you don't have any obligations at work, and you're thinking less like a surgeon, less like a doctor, and more like an executive. And more importantly, can you recognize what helps catalyze that so that our listeners can begin to perhaps put that into practice somehow?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with this whole quantity versus quality. And I really think for me, the tipping point, and I'm probably, I think I've at least passed this tipping point, is you stop counting the number of surgeries that you've performed and you really start measuring the bigger impact you're having on, for us for organization, creating patient access, putting into place more value-based programs that are helping to improve quality and lower the cost of care. And so that for me is at night, I'm not thinking about how many surgeries did I sign up today, how many cases I perform. I'm thinking about those bigger picture things. So I think you've really shifted when impact starts to matter more than volume. I really think that tends to be when that shift occurs. And I feel like I'm kind of at that tipping point and starting to tip over.
I love that. You're giving me flashbacks of, and I can't speak to your surgical colleagues in your surgical world, but if I took a couple days off in a long weekend, Monday clinic would be impossible. And I would be thinking sometime late Saturday into Sunday about how big that list was going to be on Monday morning, and actually start diving in and prepping and getting ready for who was in the hospital, who was in clinic. And then at some point, yeah, you when you're no longer doing that or doing less of it, you begin to take an appreciative view. And it's been a long several months on a big project or a big initiative. And you get this endorphin lift of appreciation. And I think you have articulated a very nice way of understanding when you've begun to shift, when you're not counting all the widgets all the time, but you're appreciating what happens out there.
It's
All
a,
right, go ahead.
as I say, it's a healthier way of being. Like you think about it, right? It's fun to eat candy, right? It gives you a quick hit, but you don't feel good about it. eating a healthy diet, it takes effort, it takes work, but there's long-term benefit, right? And so I think you can equate it to those kind of things.
Yeah. All right, let's do some lightning
Yeah,
rounds and
go
we'll
for
get
it.
to the end of this. All right. What do you think is the most underrated leadership skill in the physician executive universe that we're talking about?
I think empathy. I think empathy. I think it's getting a little bit less underappreciated, but I think learning to be empathetic.
Great. All right, next one. Biggest misconception about physician executives. What we're in that box. What's the wrong? Yeah.
That we've forgotten what it's like to be a physician. All my colleagues, oh, you're not, you become a C-suite. You're an admin. You're at, our headquarters are at Park Road. You're a Park Road person. I'm like, I am a doctor. I care for patients. And even if I wasn't, like, you never lose that. You never lose.
Yeah. That is a hard thing to hear, and I am sure when I was young and stupid, I said it, and then when I heard it on the other side, I'm like, "Yeah, I hear you. I don't agree with you, but I hear you." Yeah. What do you one word that comes to mind that describes the future of physician leadership, or two words if it must?
Um, I'm just looking out my window right now. It's bright. I think it's bright. I really do. I think you're seeing physicians get more engaged. I think we're realizing, understanding that we have to be engaged. We've got to take back our profession, not just for ourselves, but really for our patients first and foremost. And if we do that, then we will benefit as well. So I think it's bright.
Beautiful. All right. True, false. Most physicians are mentally prepared for leadership. True or false?
Oh, prepared, I'll say false. Capable, I'll say true. We've got the mental capability, but I do think we do need to recognize that it takes preparation, and that was a part of the reason that I chose. And I don't think you have to, but I chose to go get an MBA because I said, for me at least, the way I prepare is through education. And so I said, if I'm going to take on this role, I've got to go prepare. I've got the mental capability. We're surgeons, we're physicians, we're incredibly bright human beings, but we've got to get the preparation for it. And so you don't need to get an MBA. There's lots of ways to do it. But I don't think we're prepared. And I think that's part of the falsehood that occurs is we assume, oh, doctor, smart, brilliant, stick them in a boardroom. But they're not prepared for that. And that does us as physicians a disservice. And it almost reinforces what the admin thinks about us, that we shouldn't be there. So instead, take these bright people, prepare them, train them, and then put them in the boardroom and watch.
Yeah. So we get it from both sides. Admins put us in a box because they don't want us in the room, and our colleagues get mad at us when we go into that room. So I don't know what to do.
Can't win. You can't win.
Yeah, I agree. We have the capability and the capacity, and not every physician needs to go on and become a leader like we are talking about. But if you do, then have the same intentionality as you did when achieving the right stuff to get through the pre-med curriculum, medical school, and so on, and do it with intentionality. Do not just walk into the boardroom as Dr. Jones, know it all, be it all, do it all. It's much more, it's more complex than that. So, yeah.
Yes.
Well, Leo, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for everything you do for your communities in the Carolinas and to promote the role of physician leaders in healthcare. I think we both agree that we need more physician leadership development and intentionality in healthcare today. I'm curious, do you have any last thoughts or words before I wrap it up with everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, Lee, and really thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for having me on the show. I love the last word you used, intentionality. I think we need to be intentional about what we do. We were very intentional when we decided to go to medical school and be physicians. We were intentional about the path that we took to get there and to care for our patients. We need to take that same intentionality into our leadership roles.
Love it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. And if you want to learn more about what it is like to be a CMO or a CEO of a powerful physician-led group, how to get on that path to becoming a CEO in healthcare anywhere, check out our website, thefirechiefcmo.com, and connect with me on LinkedIn. I love talking with CMOs and CEOs and orthopedic spine surgeons for that matter. So get out there, be a chief, run your own practice or a healthcare company, and whatever you do, in the words of Sergeant Phil Esterhaus, remember, let's be careful out there.